was expecting the Kennedys at Martha's Vineyard at about 10 o'clock. Heard nothing, contacted the airport, were told there had been no word from the plane. They contacted FAA officials who then began this search, and it has at this point been threefold. Because of a beacon, an emergency beacon that was detected off of Long Island, Montauk Point, early this morning at about 2:15, as a matter of fact. Crews scoured that area first and have continued to scour that area, but have found nothing. They have centered the search around a 373 square mile area off of eastern Long Island. They also, because of a radar track just miles west of the vineyard last night, have searched and have located that as a major search point as well. In addition to that, Air National Guard pilots are tracing what they believe to have been the route that JFK would have taken last night. At this point, according to what the family has told us, it is believed that Kennedy was the pilot of the plane and that in fact he was the only pilot on board. There had been earlier reports that perhaps there had been a fourth passenger, a flight instructor. According to the family and what they have told us, that is not the case. The family is also saying that they are not sure that JFK Jr. had the proper license to pilot the plane last night, though the FAA has in fact not confirmed that. What is known as a fact is that because of the type of aircraft, the flight, and the weather conditions last night, an official flight plan was not filed, nor was one necessary. And because there is no flight plan, no official plan, the search and rescue teams can only surmise by looking at maps and knowing the kind of plane involved what the route would have been, and they are trying to trace that this morning. They have done so unsuccessfully several times, but are continuing to make that a part of the search this morning. It normally is approximately a 90-minute flight from Caldwell, New Jersey to the Martha's Vineyard Airport. That's the latest that we know about the search. We are continuing to be in contact with the Kennedy family, as well as Coast Guard and air rescue teams, as well as officials at the White House who tell us that the Pentagon will hold a news conference approximately an hour from now. Anthony?
Well, made so by the fact that such as this, a family like no other in American history, that seems to get into situations is drawn by whatever kind of, people have used words like curses and mystical interventions and destiny and all these other fancy words that try to explain what can somehow not be explained. This is a family that has been attracted to the flame. There's no question about it. They want to be out there. They stick their necks out there. They stick their chins out there. They take chances. They are daring. They are reckless sometimes. And it seems to be a passion with them, a desperate need, not just politically. They've had certainly some members of the family have exhibited this in combat, in military situations. We've seen it in business, in all sorts of ways. And this is what makes them so, what causes us to be so deeply fascinated by them, and why we pivot so on every event like this. It is, in this sense of the word, one uses this word reluctantly, but there's no better word. This is a unique family in this sense of the word.
Okay, we're going to go to Susan Warnick in the newsroom who has some breaking information. Susan?
We have been told by the Coast Guard that, in fact, there is now evidence of a last communication last night with JFK Jr.'s plane as it was making an approach to Martha's Vineyard Airport. Petty Officer Todd Burgun joins us from the Coast Guard base in Boston. He is a petty officer and a public information officer. Thank you for being with us, sir. What can you tell us about this last communication with JFK Jr.'s plane?
All I really know at this time is that it was at 9:39 p.m. and it was with the FAA, and it was on.
And that's where the tape was cut, ladies and gentlemen. It skips 5 hours and goes right into the 6 o'clock news.
Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, which is bringing a boat from Montauk, and that boat should be here around 8 o'clock. And as Susan mentioned, that boat has sophisticated sonar equipment that can search the bottom of the ocean. And in this particular area, the ocean is really only about 26 to 100 feet deep. That's not significant, really, in terms of depth, and will also give a very sound sonar image back to that NOAA boat. Coast Guard officials will search until dark, they say. After that, they're hoping to get that NOAA vessel with its sonar working a search grid and hoping to find some sort of information between now and the morning hours. Reporting live from Coast Guard headquarters, I'm Anthony Everett, News Center 5. Chet and Heather, back to you.
Anthony, all right, thank you. And the Admiral Larrabee said that they would schedule another news conference later on this evening should the developments warrant, should they find some additional and more significant pieces.
You're listening now to the 6 o'clock news. It skipped 5 hours from the time the tape was cut right up to the 6 o'clock news.
Earlier may not be true that there was actually no radio communication with JFK Jr.'s plane after it left New Jersey. We had hoped that perhaps there was some radio communication. Earlier may not be true that there was actually no radio communication with JFK Jr.'s plane after it left New Jersey. We had hoped that perhaps there was some radio communication.
They'll update us with another news conference.
Another thing he said that was a bit discouraging was something we had thought earlier may not be true, that there was actually no radio communication with JFK Jr.'s plane after it left New Jersey. We had hoped that perhaps there was some radio communication, of course, most recently at Martha's Vineyard this last night at about 9 o'clock, 9:30, when perhaps things started to go wrong. We had hoped we could learn from that, but it seems that there may be no evidence because there may be no recording to listen to get those details from.
All right, Heather, News Center 5 at 6 begins now.
Live from News Center 5, this is a special report.
We are still in the search and rescue phase, and I want to underscore that. The importance of us doing a thorough search out there is what we're focused on, and we're going to do everything we can to continue to investigate the current information on future debris and to continue to search for survivors.
The Coast Guard holds out hope for survivors after the apparent crash of a small airplane carrying John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife, and sister-in-law. Our coverage continues now at 6 with more on this very disturbing story that's been developing all day long off of Martha's Vineyard.
The Coast Guard continues to search at this hour for the small single-engine plane that was carrying John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn, and Carolyn's sister Lauren Bissett. The search area has now been narrowed greatly. It is centered about 17 miles southwest of Martha's Vineyard. The plane was to have landed at Martha's Vineyard to drop off Mrs. Kennedy's sister, and then was to travel on to Hyannisport.
Our colleagues at the networks and our competitors here in this market as well have all been on the air with nonstop coverage of this. And Clark, you and I were talking before about it's a testament to some extent to the intense interest with this family, the intense legacy of the 35th President of the United States, and the intense scrutiny as well under which this family has lived and continues to live.
Well, made so by the fact of such as this. A family like no other in American history that seems to get into situations is drawn by whatever kind of, people have used words like curses and mystical interventions and destiny and all these other fancy words that try to explain what can somehow not be explained. This is a family that has been attracted to the flame. There's no question about it. They want to be out there. They stick their necks out there. They stick their chins out there. They take chances. They are daring. They are reckless sometimes. And it seems to be a passion with them, a desperate need, not just politically. They've had their, certainly some members of the family have exhibited this in combat, in military situations. We've seen it in business, in all sorts of ways. And this is what makes them so, what causes us to be so deeply fascinated by them, and why we pivot so on every event like this. It is, in this sense of the word, one uses this word reluctantly, but there's no better word. This is a unique family in this sense of the word.
Okay, we're going to go to Susan Warnick in the newsroom who has some breaking information. Susan?
We have been told by the Coast Guard that, in fact, there is now evidence of a last communication last night with JFK Jr.'s plane as it was making an approach to Martha's Vineyard Airport. Petty Officer Todd Burgun joins us from the Coast Guard base in Boston. He is the Petty Officer and a Public Information Officer. Thank you for being with us, sir. What can you tell us about this last communication with JFK Jr.'s plane?
All I really know at this time is that it was at 9:39 p.m. and it was with the FAA, and it was on its final approach to Martha's Vineyard. All that really helps us do as far as the search is it might give us a location to search in, because if it was that close to Martha's Vineyard with the last contact, then chances are it may be in that area if in fact it did go down.
Officer, for those of us who are not that intimately familiar with flying and piloting a plane, when you say you had radio contact, can you explain exactly what that means? Did JFK Jr. himself radio in that he was on a final approach?
Unfortunately, I did not have the specifics of the call. The call came to the FAA, and I cannot speak for them and what was said.
Would that be the routine procedure, however, in a flight?
I believe it would be, yes. They made contact with the tower.
So at 9:39, to the best of your information, JFK Jr. made a contact with the airport, with the flight controllers, the air traffic controllers at Martha's Vineyard Airport, that he was on a final descent.
That is correct.
At 9:39. We also have information that the FAA also has a radar location of 2,500 feet, about 10 miles off the vineyard, at approximately the same time. Do you have any information?
No, I do not have any information on that.
Given that information, is it safe to assume that that would be the location of one part of the search?
Yes, it is. That is a flagged area of the search. We are searching still the entire location between Caldwell, New Jersey, and Hyannis, Massachusetts.
When you say Hyannis, and of course that includes the area around Martha's Vineyard.
Yes, the plane was making two stops. The plane was originally took off from Caldwell, New Jersey at 8:38 p.m. Friday evening. It was scheduled to land in Martha's Vineyard at around 10 p.m. and then scheduled to land in Hyannis at around 12.
At midnight?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, that's new information, because previously there was some indication that the trip to Hyannis Airport would be made this morning. So that's new information. The plane left New Jersey at 8:38, expected to arrive at Martha's Vineyard. For what purpose? Do you know, sir?
I do not have that information now.
But they were scheduled then to take off from Martha's Vineyard Airport, I would assume, at about 11 o'clock, because it certainly is no longer than about a 35-minute flight between Martha's Vineyard and Hyannis.
That's correct. Well, it's only speculation I cannot comment on. They did not leave a flight plan, so I do not have the specifics of the flight.
Can you explain for us, please, describe the search to the best as you can that the Coast Guard is involved in?
Yeah, the Coast Guard now we have a massive search underway, including several aircraft from throughout the district, mainly from Coast Guard Air Station Cape Cod, and also from several stations throughout the coast of New England.
So it's safe for us to assume now that when the family members in Hyannis did not hear word from from the people on board the plane at midnight when they expected it to land.
Yeah, I cannot comment on exactly how that transpired.
I understand, but you can comment on your search and the last radio transmission again, which was at 9:39.
Yes, p.m. last night. That is correct.
Ostensibly JFK radioing the tower at Martha's Vineyard Airport that he was making his final.
That's my
approach.
understanding. Yes.
And that's the last time the plane was heard from.
That is correct.
At approximately 2,500 feet, 10 miles offshore.
That's my understanding. Like I said, as far as that radar location, I do not have that information.
Officer, is there anything that I failed to ask you that we should know that we do know either about the search or about the situation last night?
No, I think that covers everything we're doing. Like I said, we have an extensive search underway with aircraft and boats and vessels in the water, and we're searching every possible area we can.
Officer Berggun, what are the conditions right now during your search?
I don't have that information.
When you do a search like this, even though you can't talk about the particulars of this one, could you describe how it occurs? We talked to somebody from the Langley Air Force Base. They describe this as a discipline search. What exactly does
Well,
that mean?
basically what the Coast Guard does in a situation like this is they'll chart out the area that they're going to search, and they'll do what they call like a crosshatch pattern. And they'll fly, picture like a checkerboard, and they'll cross and make crosses. They'll start going from point to point with their aircraft, and same thing with the vessels in the water.
To the best of your knowledge, have they found anything at all in the water?
No, nothing at all.
How long have you been searching in the water today?
I'm not sure the exact time. I know it's from early hours this morning.
How long will you continue to search?
I don't have that information. I cannot make that call right now.
How does it normally work? What factors are involved as you determine how long a search will continue?
There's several factors that could be involved in that. I don't want to speculate on anything. On several searches, it depends on many different factors. It depends on if they find anything at all. It depends on weather conditions. It depends on time of day. There's several factors that can determine the length of a search. I don't want to speculate on this search.
And as the search continues minute by minute, I assume that decisions are also being made.
That is correct.
In a similar way. Petty Officer Todd Berggun from the Coast Guard base in Boston, thank you very much for your time and information. If it's all right, sir, we will check back with you within an hour or so for any update.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Folks, also, as we've been telling you, the Pentagon will hold a press conference at about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and the Coast Guard, unless there is reason for it sooner, will hold a press conference at 4 o'clock this afternoon. But again, we have confirmed that at 9:39 last night, JFK did radio air traffic controllers at the Martha's Vineyard Airport that he was making his final approach. He was approximately 2,500 feet, 10 miles offshore. It's the last communication or tracking of the plane last night that took off from New Jersey at 8:38, was expected at 10 o'clock at Martha's Vineyard Airport, and then was expected new information at Hyannis Airport at midnight. Of course, as we have said, it was not heard from since 9:39 last night.
We have learned that this plane took off from the Essex Airport, as you know, in Caldwell, New Jersey, and was flying at an altitude of 5,500 feet. The plane then went out over the ocean, and as it was approaching the Vineyard, we're told it descended to 2,500 feet. Then there's another radar hit, apparently at 2,100 feet, and then another radar hit at 1,300 feet, and that is the last radar hit, we are told, before apparently the plane disappeared off radar. And we are told that radar hit did occur about 19 miles from the Vineyard Airport. It may be as little as 10 miles actually off the coast of the Vineyard, but 19 miles from the airport. But we are told again that 1,300 feet apparently is the last altitude at which that plane registered on radar, and then it was lost.
Chet, as Susan mentioned, you are an accomplished pilot. Chet's been piloting planes now for over 20 years, so you're a very good source on this story, as well as the news gatherer. The altitude that John F. Kennedy Jr. was at as he was approaching Martha's Vineyard Airport, is that a normal altitude? Is that a safe altitude?
Sure it is. We just heard now 1,300 feet, and one thing to remember is there's so much that we don't know, and we're plugging in a lot of information here into spaces that we're not exactly sure of. To be at 2,500 feet, 10 miles out is not unusual. To be at 1,300 feet, 6 or 7 miles out would not be unusual. He was a decent pilot, everyone by every measure, did not have an instrument rating. The weather was hazy. That does not mean that you couldn't fly in hazy weather. I've heard some wild speculation on the radio and on television this morning. One of the network correspondents talking about as if some people who fly little airplanes are daredevils and have a death wish. I mean, that is definitely not the case. That's a perfectly good, safe airplane. It was equipped, I'm certain, with the latest avionics, probably even an autopilot, which if he had some trouble, if he punched on the autopilot, it would have kept the wings level and the aircraft at a particular altitude. So
it is a small plane, though, 24 feet long. You said with a 37-foot wingspan. Searching for a plane like that is incredibly difficult. Searching for a large aircraft is difficult.
No question. It was difficult looking for the pieces of TWA's Flight 800, which was a 747.
So I have to explain a few things to you. Remember that the search was first concentrated off Montauk Point, and the reason was somebody had planted a transponder or a beacon there. And no plane had crashed there. No boat had sunk there. There was no reason for a beacon to be off Montauk Point, but somebody had planted one there to deliberately deceive the rescue operations. That's where they concentrated their search. Now, they had miles and miles of radar tapes of all the planes that were flying anywhere in that area that night, and it would have taken them days and days to go through those radar tapes in order to discover, exactly if a plane dropped off the radar and when and where that happened. It wasn't until they found out. Now, listen to this very carefully, because their denial that John F. Kennedy called the tower at Martha's Vineyard is the key to this whole thing. You see, they never would have known the right place to look if he had not made that call. When they discovered that he had made a call to the airport tower at Martha's Vineyard at 9:39 p.m., they instantly went to 9:39 p.m. at that position 10 miles southwest of the Land's End of Martha's Vineyard, and they immediately saw his plane on the radar tapes at 2,500 feet. Exactly 12 seconds later, it was at 1,300 feet. Going from 2,500 feet to 1,300 feet in 12 seconds means the plane was in a severe diving attitude directly into the water. At that 1,300-foot point was the last indication of the plane on the radar. When they discovered that he had made that call at 9:39, from that position where he reported his plane on his final glide path to the airport at Martha's Vineyard, they went to the radar tapes, found his plane on the radar tapes, moved the search to that exact position, and immediately discovered John F. Kennedy's beacon that was in the water there, began to see floating debris, luggage, pieces of the airplane, an airplane tire, etc., etc., etc. So that is the smoking gun. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's a serious cover-up connected with this. When you call the tower at Martha's Vineyard and attempt to talk to the person who was on duty that night, who actually received the radio call from John F. Kennedy, Jr., you are told that that person is not there, hasn't been there for a long time, and probably will never be back. When you talk to these people that you heard tonight on this tape at WCVB-TV in Boston, they deny that they ever made this report. They just flatly deny it. We are not supposed to have this tape. Nobody is supposed to have this tape. We want this tape to go all over the country. If you want a copy of this tape, send us $15 and we'll send you a copy postpaid right to your door. Then make copies and distribute it to everybody you know, so this tape can never, ever be buried. This is the key to the whole thing. This is what solves it. John F. Kennedy, Jr. was murdered, ladies and gentlemen. 2 Saturdays, after his plane crashed, and I posted this story on the website, a military officer acting as a courier on orders from his commanding officer brought me photographs and copies of the preliminary investigation reports based upon the wreckage and what they knew of the plane crash. What I saw in those photographs and in those reports was that a bomb detonated in a compartment in the tail section of the plane. The tail section was severed from the plane. The plane went into an immediate dive and crashed into the ocean. The cause of the detonation of the explosive was a barometric triggering device which was detonated when he flew below 2,500 feet. And that's the story. On the hour of the time, on this October the 13th, 1999, once again, the hour of the time has scooped the world. We have given you the truth, the real story, the story you never heard and never will hear on CNN, ABC, NBC, or CBS, what we commonly refer to here as the communist news networks. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you all. Good night, Annie, Pooh, and Allison. I love you. I love you. I hate being parted from you, but I must fight this battle.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So you've heard you heard the official story, and you heard the original tape that got cut and got edited. Now, William Cooper came to the conclusion. Now, William Cooper was one of the very few people, guys, that was standing up for the truth, that was exposing the deception of Mockingbird Media, what he calls Communist Network. He knew back then that the Mockingbird Media was the liar, the deceiver, the enemy of the people. He already knew, and he came to the conclusion that this was not an accident, but that JFK Jr. was murdered. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to suggest to you that if you continue to watch the videos to come, that JFK Jr. was not murdered, but this entire thing was a setup, that he could hide for 20 years and then return again, having executed the plan to take down the deep state cabal, the bloodline of the Pharaoh from Egypt. Ladies and gentlemen, I am suggesting to you that he never died and he was not murdered, but that there was an attempt to take him out, and that he was fully aware of it and he planned accordingly. But it should be obvious at this point, if nothing else, that there was a cover-up to the accident of JFK Jr. Stay tuned for the next episode.